Hey everyone, it's Dr. Nightstare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. I was driving alone that night. Rain streamed across the windshield, blurring the road ahead, making the highway slick and treacherous. The tires lost traction without warning, and the car veered with sudden force. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, but the vehicle slid at a high speed. The tires screeched against the wet asphalt, a desperate sound. My breath caught in my throat. The concrete barrier grew larger in my distorted view, rushing closer with terrifying speed. Time stretched, each moment expanding. I saw my reflection in the side window, a face contorted with shock and fear. I braced for the collision, my body tensing against the seatbelt, every muscle rigid. The world twisted with a brutal impact. Metal shrieked and tore, glass shattered, exploding inwards. The car began to barrel roll, tumbling end over end through the darkness, a dizzying blur of motion and noise. Every bone in my body vibrated with crushing forces. The last sensation was a wrenching jolt, a violent stop. Then consciousness dissolved, leaving only absolute emptiness. I woke slowly, disoriented by the crisp white sheets and the persistent throbbing ache that encompassed my entire body. The sterile scent of the hospital filled my nostrils. I learned the extent of my injuries, shattered bones, torn ligaments, internal trauma. The doctors offered grim prognoses regarding my future mobility, speaking of significant limitations and long-term consequences that would reshape my life. Months blurred into a grueling cycle of physical therapy and relentless rehabilitation. I pushed through searing pain during each session, enduring the agony of relearning to move every damaged limb, to stand without assistance, to take an independent step. Every muscle screamed in protest from the effort, but I persisted, fueled by an unyielding resolve to regain my previous self. My therapists watched with growing surprise as my body slowly responded, exceeding all their medical expectations. I walked again, then stronger, then further, eventually covering great distances. The near-death experience carved a new perspective into my entire being. Life, once taken for granted, now felt like a precious gift that demanded careful attention. I found deep contentment in the simplest acts. The feeling of sun on my skin, the sound of birdsong from an open window, the steady rhythm of my own breath. I embraced walking everywhere, choosing to traverse the city on foot, savoring each deliberate step, actively reconnecting with the tangible world around me in a way I never had before. I walked through my neighborhood one warm afternoon, enjoying the gentle breeze. Ahead, a young mother pushed a stroller, her small son walking beside her. The child looked up as I approached, his gaze meeting mine. His face twisted with fear. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. He pointed a trembling finger at me. His wide eyes filled with tears, fixed on my face with terror. He began to sob, a wrenching sound echoing on the street. He buried his face into his mother's leg, shaking. His mother looked down at him, then up at me, surprise and concern mixing in her expression. She bent to comfort her distraught child, trying to soothe his fear. The mother pulled her son closer, murmuring soothing words against his hair. His small body still shook with fright. He clung to her leg, his face buried deep. His sobs softened, but his eyes remained wide and fixed on something past me, a distant terror. Then, a chilling whisper escaped his lips through his shuddering breath. "He wasn't supposed to survive," the child said, his voice barely audible. The words carried a stark precision, striking me with an unexpected force. A sudden coldness enveloped my entire being. The vibrant world around me skewed, shifting on its axis. My heart beat with inexplicable dread. Every memory of the accident, of the recovery, of my newfound appreciation for life reordered itself into a disturbing sequence. The simple fact of my existence transformed into an impossible question. I exist in this metal box now, buried deep beneath the earth. The recycled air tastes stale and metallic, a constant reminder of my confinement. He is coming for me, methodically tearing through every obstacle between us, and I remember the day this all began. It was my 25th birthday, a bright Tuesday in May. The city around me vibrated with routine energy, people rushing through their morning commutes, oblivious to the fabric of reality that was about to unravel for me. I walked along the sidewalk, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin, headed toward my usual coffee shop. A figure stood by the brick wall near the entrance, a man I had never seen before. He wore a dark suit, impeccably tailored, and a smile that seemed to understand secrets. He did not move like other people. There was an unsettling stillness about him, an absence of typical human restlessness. "Mark," he said, his voice a smooth, unexpected resonance that cut through the city sounds. I stopped, surprised he knew my name. "I have an offer for you. 1 week of immortality." My laughter was immediate, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "Immortality? What kind of joke is this?" His smile widened, showing teeth that seemed a little too sharp. "No joke at all. For 7 days you will not die. Any injury, any affliction will simply mend. There is a catch, of course, a small one really. It will cost you your soul." The words hung in the air, heavy and absurd. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the impossible statement with the man's undeniable presence. There was an undeniable pull, a dangerous curiosity. The promise of such power, even for a limited time, felt intoxicating. I looked at his eyes then, and saw something ancient, something hungry. A part of me screamed to run, but a stronger, reckless impulse pushed me forward. "A week," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And my soul." He nodded once. "Accept." I swallowed hard. The moment I spoke the words, a powerful energy surged through my body. It was a jolt, not painful, but utterly transformative. My senses sharpened, the world around me snapped into vivid focus, every color brighter, every sound clearer. A vibrant awareness replaced my old self, settling deep within my bones, making my entire being vibrate with a new clarity. I felt invincible, alive in a way I had never experienced. Before I could even process the sensation fully, the stranger moved. His hand, impossibly fast, shot out. Something gleamed. A cold edge pressed against my throat. I felt a searing pain, a quick, brutal separation as my blood burst forth, spraying across the brick wall behind him. My body convulsed, collapsing to the pavement. The city's sounds faded as darkness claimed me. Then, just as quickly, the darkness shattered. I gasped, sucking in a lungful of air, my eyes snapping open. Sunlight poured onto my face. I stood on the same sidewalk, by the same brick wall, the familiar sounds of the city once again surrounding me. My throat was whole. No blood stained the pavement. The stranger stood before me, still smiling. The same dark suit, the same unsettling stillness. He was watching me with an amused expression, and I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that my endless nightmare had just begun. He watched me with an amused expression. A cold memory surfaced then, a vivid flash of a shining blade, the gush of my own blood, the brutal separation of life from body. I remembered the instant before the darkness, the sharp pain, the sudden cold. This was not a dream. This was a rerun, an impossible replay of my violent death. The city sounds that had once brought comfort now held a mocking quality. This was real, and he stood before me, the architect of my horrifying rebirth. Panic surged. I bolted, pushing off the sidewalk with all my strength. I ran blindly, weaving through the morning commuters, ignoring their shouts of protest. The city blurred into a frantic mosaic of motion and sound. My lungs burned, air rasping in my throat. I glanced back, expecting to see him far behind, but he was there, effortlessly matching my stride. His hand, impossibly fast, clamped onto my shoulder. A searing pain shot through my spine as he twisted, lifting me off the ground, then slamming me down onto the unforgiving pavement. My skull cracked against the concrete. Darkness swallowed me whole. The darkness shattered. I gasped, sucking in air, standing on the same sidewalk, the sunlight warming my face. He smiled. The memory of the broken skull was fresh, a phantom ache. This time I spotted a police cruiser 2 blocks away. Hope, foolish and fragile, spurred me forward. I sprinted toward it, shouting, "Help me! He's trying to kill me!" The officer, a young woman, looked up, her expression confused. Before I could explain, the stranger materialized beside me. He simply smiled at the officer. Her eyes glazed over for a moment, then she frowned at me. "Sir, calm down," she said, her voice flat. "There is no danger." The stranger's hand darted out, grabbing my wrist. He twisted, pulling me into a chokehold. The officer watched, unmoving, as my vision swam, my breath cut off. My body convulsed, then slumped. Darkness. Again, the light, the street, his smile. The accumulated deaths stacked within my mind, a horrifying catalog of endings. The broken skull, the twisted neck, the sudden blade. I stood there, rooted, refusing to engage. "I won't play your game," I said, my voice hoarse. I tried to walk past him, to simply ignore his presence. His arm extended, blocking my path. "You are already playing, Mark," he said, his voice a silken thread of amusement. He struck, a swift, brutal punch to my gut. I doubled over, gasping for air that would not come. He pressed a hand to my face, then squeezed. The world went black, my neck snapping with a wet crack. Each reset deepened the despair. Days blurred into weeks, then months, though the calendar never advanced past my birthday. The city became a stage for my torment, the people background actors in a play where I was the perpetual victim. I accumulated a library of deaths within my mind. Blunt force, sharp blades falling from heights, drowning, poison, immolation. Each memory added a layer to the growing weight on my sanity. My scream became a raw, silent thing trapped within the loop, unheard by anyone but me. He started to experiment. The quick, efficient kills gave way to prolonged agony. One time he bound me, placing me in the path of oncoming traffic, watching as vehicles struck me repeatedly. Another, he pushed me into the river and held my head beneath the water until my lungs burned and burst, then repeated the drowning process. His eyes, always so calm, now held a glint of perverse pleasure. He savored my fear, drew satisfaction from my suffering. I was a toy, a plaything in his endless game, and he enjoyed breaking me in new ways with each passing hour, refining his methods to maximize my terror and pain. My will began to fracture under the relentless torment. After countless deaths, after the taste of blood became as familiar as the morning coffee, a different kind of resolve began to form within me. I could not escape the loop. I could not fight him. His power was absolute. Running was futile. Calling for help was pointless. The only way forward was to accept the nightmare and learn its horrifying rules. I had to adapt, to survive each terrible day, to understand this endless tormentor. My goal shifted from escaping death to simply enduring it, to watching him, to learning his patterns, to understanding the parameters of my eternal suffering. After countless deaths, after the taste of blood became as familiar as the morning coffee, a different kind of resolve began to form within me. I could not escape the loop. I could not fight him. His power was absolute. Running was futile. Calling for help was pointless. The only way forward was to accept the nightmare and learn its horrifying rules. I had to adapt, to survive each terrible day, to understand this endless tormentor. My goal shifted from escaping death to simply enduring it, to watching him, to learning his patterns, to understanding the parameters of my eternal suffering. The world outside my own personal hell continued its relentless Tuesday morning. I lived through 1,000 variations of my death, then 10,000, then countless more. My initial terror fractured and reformed into something colder, a calculating detachment. Each death became a data point, an experiment in cause and effect. I stopped screaming. I stopped pleading. My focus narrowed to observation, to understanding the parameters of the game. I learned to watch myself die, not with fear, but with an almost academic interest. Pain registered as a sensation, not an agony that broke my spirit. My mind, stripped of its former anxieties, became a repository of strategy, cold and precise. My physical form, though resetting with each loop, became a vessel of accumulated knowledge. My hands learned to pick locks after hundreds of fumbled attempts. My eyes memorized surveillance camera blind spots across the city. My body learned to move with an economical grace born from countless failed escapes and subsequent brutal terminations. I studied anatomy from the perspective of how a body breaks, and how to avoid that breakage. I observed the stranger, his movements, his subtle tells, the patterns in his unpredictability. He varied his attacks, but his approach often held a familiar rhythm, a preference for certain methods in specific scenarios. I started to predict, to anticipate. Years passed within the loop, lifetimes compounded into a terrifying education. I learned to drive cars, then trucks, then specialized vehicles, stealing them after countless trial and error runs where I crashed and died, only to restart the Tuesday morning with another lesson learned. I taught myself basic mechanics, how to hotwire complex systems. I practiced martial arts, not for combat against the stranger, which remained impossible, but for efficient movement, for leveraging my physical form in evasive maneuvers. I learned to navigate the city's underbelly, its abandoned tunnels, its forgotten service routes. Every new skill, every piece of information, became a brick in the wall I was building against my tormentor. Impersonation became a crucial tool. I observed people, their mannerisms, their speech patterns, their identification badges. With thousands of lives to perfect the act, I could mimic a security guard, a delivery driver, a government agent. My voice adapted, my posture shifted. I learned to forge documents, to bypass digital security systems, all through repeated efforts, punctuated by gruesome deaths when I made a mistake. I developed an understanding of human psychology, learning to manipulate conversations, to extract information, to blend seamlessly into any environment. Social engineering became a refined art, a way to open doors that were otherwise impenetrable. My past self, the ordinary Mark from that fateful Tuesday, had been erased, replaced by an entity honed by endless suffering and endless learning. My ultimate goal crystallized after what felt like centuries of this existence. Not escape, for that seemed impossible, but temporary sanctuary. A place the stranger could not immediately breach, a place where I could breathe, even for a short time, away from his omnipresent shadow. I focused my efforts, dedicating every loop to gathering intelligence on secure locations. The idea of a military bunker, deep underground, presented itself as the most viable option. I began systematically infiltrating various government and defense databases, dying countless times in the process, each reset bringing me closer to the schematics, the access codes, the protocols. I spent what felt like decades assembling the pieces, accumulating enough information and skill to execute the most complex plan I had ever conceived. I would steal a high-security transport, impersonate a top-level security clearance, and access the most fortified army bunker in the region. Each step of the plan was rehearsed over hundreds of lives. The acquisition of the vehicle, the bypass of perimeter defenses, the navigation through layers of biometric and digital locks, the final entry into the underground facility. Every interaction, every code, every potential obstacle was cataloged and solved. Then, on one Tuesday, after what felt like a million Mondays, I executed the plan. I woke on the sidewalk, observed the stranger, then moved. My actions were precise, a choreographed dance perfected over untold repetitions. I bypassed the initial patrols, acquired the necessary transport, and drove it through the night. My fabricated credentials opened every gate, every door. I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, my mind a map of the facility, until I stood before the final blast door. My fingers, steady and practiced, entered the complex sequence. The heavy metal groaned open, revealing a sealed environment, an airlock. I stepped inside, the door hissing shut behind me. I cycled through the airlock, my senses alert for any sign of him. The inner door opened, revealing a secure command center, empty and silent. Thick concrete walls, meters deep, surrounded me. Layers of hardened steel and advanced defenses separated me from the outside world. I had done it. I had reached a place that, for a precious moment, felt utterly inviolable. I walked to the main console, activated the external cameras, and watched the static image of the world above. A sense of weary triumph settled over me, a sensation I had not felt in untold ages. Here, deep beneath the earth, I believed I had found temporary refuge. The static image on the main console flickered, then resolved into a chaotic scene from the army base above. Smoke billowed from a distant barracks, black plumes rising into the clear morning sky. Soldiers moved with frantic urgency, some falling, others firing wildly at nothing visible on the screen. The perimeter fences had been torn apart, guard towers toppled, their twisted metal structures lying broken on the ground. Vehicles burned, their tires melting into puddles of rubber. The air, even through the monitor's filter, seemed to vibrate with destruction. Then he appeared. He moved through the devastation with impossible grace, a dark figure against the backdrop of ruin. He walked past a fallen soldier, not bothering to look down, his path unerring. Another soldier, clearly terrified, raised a weapon, firing a useless burst that tore into the ground. The stranger simply reached out, his hand closing around the soldier's neck. There was no struggle, only a quick, final snap. He dropped the body, then continued forward. He was not rushing, he was methodical, a predator enjoying the hunt. He systematically dismantled the base's defenses, moving from checkpoint to checkpoint, each one falling with precise determination. I watched as alarms blared, as explosions rocked distant buildings, as the desperate shouts of men echoed across the feed. Each death was a calculated step towards my position. He was not merely breaking in, he was clearing a path, enjoying the process. He paused at a fortified entrance, observing a group of soldiers desperately trying to reinforce it. Instead of forcing his way through, he simply ripped a communication antenna from a nearby tower, then used it as a crude spear, impaling one soldier after another through the reinforced door itself, their desperate cries silenced with sickening efficiency. There was no rage in his movements, only a cold, efficient determination that spoke of great malice. He was not just killing, he was demonstrating, asserting his absolute power with every brutal act. He wanted me to see it all. I pressed a button on the console, activating the intercom, my voice resonating with a cold defiance I had cultivated over lifetimes. "You cannot reach me here," I said, my words echoing in the secure room. "You have played your game long enough." The stranger stopped in the feed, turning his head slightly towards the camera. He raised a hand, as if casually adjusting an invisible earpiece. A ripple of something unexpected crossed his face. He began to laugh. It was not a chuckle or a cruel sneer. His laughter started as a low, guttural sound, then quickly swelled, filling the speaker with unrestrained joy. His head tilted back slightly, his eyes closing for a moment as pure mirth consumed him. It was rapturous, a sound that spoke of complete delight, of finding the pinnacle of satisfaction. His entire body shook with the force of it. His face, usually so impassive, was alight with terrifying happiness. His teeth, gleaming white, were visible in a wide, genuine smile. This was the laughter of true, unburdened pleasure. He was not pretending. He was genuinely overjoyed. "Mark," he finally said, his voice still laced with lingering amusement, "it's only a matter of time." He opened his eyes, now wide and sparkling with terrifying eagerness. He looked directly into the camera, into my eyes, and I saw a truth that stopped my heart. This was not about immortality, or a soul, or a test. This was about the thrill of the chase, the meticulous breaking of a spirit. I was not a victim. I was his ultimate plaything, a pawn in a game he cherished above all else. His pursuit was not a means to an end, it was the entire point. His joy was real, terrifying in its purity. He loved this. He loved this. He loved Miki being caught in this cycle of fear and death, forever escaping, forever learning, forever leading him on. A high-pitched whine started then, cutting through the quiet of the bunker. It was a piercing, metallic shriek that vibrated through the very foundation of the earth. The sound grew louder, steadier, an unmistakable drilling noise. It was coming from above, burrowing through the layers of concrete and steel. He was not just clearing a path, he was already here. The sound was directly overhead, relentless and growing. My bitter fury burned a raw heat through my ancient bones. The monstrous blizzard screamed around me, a violent, chaotic torrent of snow and wind. Sharp, freezing particles stung my face, tearing at my frost-covered beard as I gripped the reins with white-knuckled hands. I pushed my reindeer onward, a desperate charge through the unforgiving Arctic wasteland. The Ice Witch had taken the children from Dashenport, a cruel theft fueling my uncharacteristic rage. She would not escape my wrath. Donna cried out, his legs buckling as a jagged shard of ice tore into his powerful flank. Blood painted a stark red stripe across his white fur, but I urged him forward. Vixen whimpered, her left foreleg twisted at an unnatural angle, the bone audibly cracking under the strain. I heard Comet gasp for breath, his lungs burning, yet the urgency of our mission, the stolen innocence of those children, forced us to press on through the witch's dark magic and the elements. Her ice magic hammered the sleigh without mercy. A blast of frozen energy hit the side, shattering a runner into 1,000 glittering splinters. The old wood groaned under the assault. Rudolph's fiery nose cut a blazing path through the swirling white chaos, our only guide against the witch's relentless assault. Another surge of power struck the body of the sled. The remaining runners snapped with a sharp crack, pitching me violently forward. The ancient sleigh broke apart, wooden pieces flying into the howling wind. We plummeted, no longer flying, into the deep, churning snow below. The impact from the sleigh's destruction sent us sprawling, but Rudolph regained his footing. I pulled myself onto his broad back. The Ice Witch's mountain fortress rose before us, a grim peak of frozen stone. Rudolph's powerful legs carried us across the snow-choked ground to the main gate, a thick barrier of ancient ice and splintered wood. He snorted, a brilliant jet of searing flame erupting from his nose and striking the frozen portal. The gate shrieked, then exploded inward, shards of ice and wood scattering across the courtyard. We plunged into the castle's frigid depths, Rudolph's glowing nose illuminating the dark, echoing halls. Small, hunched figures, the witch's goblin men, scrabbled from shadowed alcoves. Their crude ice picks flashed, but a swipe from Rudolph's antler or a quick punch from my gloved hand sent them sprawling and defeated. We moved with purpose, following the sound of fearful whimpers. A heavy iron door, encrusted with hoarfrost, stood slightly ajar at the end of a long corridor. I pushed it open. The children huddled together inside, their small bodies trembling from the cold and their fright. Their eyes widened when they saw me, a mix of terror and sudden hope. I knelt before them, my voice a gentle rumble despite the rage still burning within me. "You are safe now, my dears," I told them, my hand resting on the nearest child's head. "I have come for you all." Rudolph's warm breath fogged the cold air, his radiant nose casting a comforting glow over the shivering group. They needed warmth and a way out. I knew the witch would not give up so easily. I would face her. "Rudolph, guard them," I commanded, my voice firm. "Keep them warm and safe. I will return." He nudged me with his nose, a silent understanding passing between us. I turned and walked back into the cold corridor, my steps echoing as I prepared to find the Ice Witch. I found her in the heart of the citadel, in a vast frozen chamber where delicate ice formations rose from the floor like crystalline trees. She stood at the center, a solitary figure draped in robes of frosted silver, her back to me. A single, tall spire of ice, needle-sharp, pierced the high ceiling above her, its tip glowing with a cold, internal light. She turned slowly when I entered, her gaze, Arctic blue, fixing on mine without surprise. "You have come," she said, her voice carrying a desolate echo through the immense space. "I expected you, old man." "The children," I stated, my voice gruff, the rage still a bitter taste in my mouth. "They do not belong to you." She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound without joy or warmth. "Belong to me? They belong to no one. But they were here with me. Do you comprehend what true solitude is like, generation after generation, in this desolate waste? I have seen centuries pass. I have watched life unfold from afar, never touching, never connecting. These children, they were my only workers, my only companions in this endless cold." Her features, though sharp and regal, held a deep weariness, a loneliness that settled deeply within her. It resonated with a forgotten corner of my own ancient memory. I lowered my guard, a fleeting weakness born from understanding. I advanced slowly across the ice-slick floor, offering a soft tone. "No one deserves such a fate," I said, my voice now a gentle rumble. "Such isolation can break even the strongest spirit. There are other ways, other paths to find warmth, to find companionship, to find peace." Her fingers gripped a long, translucent ice dagger, the blade a cruel extension of her frozen will, its point aimed loosely towards the floor. Her eyes held mine, unblinking, unreadable. I closed the remaining distance, my movement smooth and unhurried. The air around her grew colder, a biting chill that seeped into my bones, but I ignored it. My hand reached out, not in comfort, but with a different, terrible intent. I grasped her wrist, twisting her hand with sudden, brutal force. The ice dagger sprang free, its crystalline hilt cold against my palm. Her eyes widened, a flash of pure terror replacing the weariness. With the same swift motion, before she could utter a sound, I drove the sharp point deep into her chest, directly into her heart. The blade met no resistance, shattering the icy core within her. She stiffened. A gasp caught in her throat, her body frozen for a moment in a grotesque tableau of agony and surprise. Then her eyes glazed over and she collapsed to the floor, a heap of frosted silver robes and broken ice. The long, internal reign of the ice witch was finished. I knelt beside her fallen form, the shattered ice blade still protruding from her chest. The raw necessity of my act crashed over me. A chilling sensation extinguished the last of my rage. My hands, still tingling from the lethal grip, trembled as I looked at her still face. The weariness in her eyes, glimpsed just before the end, now seemed to deepen into an eternal quiet sorrow. Unexpected grief welled up within me. Hot tears streamed from my eyes, tracing paths through my beard. Each tear detached, crystallizing into a gleaming, perfectly cut jewel. They fell onto her frosted robes with a soft clink. Rudolph entered the chamber. His warm glow contrasted the glacial surroundings. He nudged my shoulder gently with his nose. He offered silent comfort. His presence helped my sudden despair. He understood the terrible burden I now carried. We would leave her to the goblin men, her mournful subjects. She had wanted company, and in death they would be hers. We gathered the children from their cold room, assuring them the danger had passed. Their small faces were still pale, but hope slowly returned to their eyes as Rudolph's light enveloped them. We flew them swiftly back to Dashenport, landing softly in the town square. Parents rushed forward, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces as they embraced their returned children. Christmas would be restored, its magic rekindled. I watched the reunions, a small smile touching my lips. But the quiet sorrow remained. A heavy burden settled within my ancient heart. This was the hidden cost of the brutal path I had walked. The brother woke with a sudden, disorienting jolt that snapped his eyes open into the room's oppressive darkness. He saw a dark, indistinct mass in the far corner, a deeper patch against the already dim walls. He stared, attempting to make sense of the shape, his mind scrambling for a rational explanation. It felt like an illusion, a trick of a waking mind, perhaps a lingering dream fragment. He tried to blink it away, to convince himself it was not there. But the form remained, solidifying, its presence asserting itself in the room. A primal fear then gripped him, dispelling any thought of illusion. The shadow was undeniably real. It had a predatory stillness, and a deep dread settled in his core, tightening his chest with an unspoken terror. The shadow solidified, becoming a static void. Its presence felt oppressive. It consumed the dim light, absorbing all hope within the room. My brother lay there, frozen, a silent plea building within his chest as terror locked his body. Every fiber of his being screamed for movement, for escape, for a sound to escape his throat. He strained to call out, desperate to wake me, his sibling, but his voice would not come. His limbs remained still, locked, refusing to respond to his frantic will. He fought to break free from unseen bonds, to sit up, to roll away, but his efforts were futile. All the while, I was caught in my own terrible dream. A terrifying nightmare held me captive, vivid and relentless. Unseen horrors coiled around me, pulling me deeper into a suffocating darkness. My body felt heavy, weighted down by a crushing dread that pressed against my chest. I struggled, trapped within the vivid landscape of my dream, unable to stir from my own bed. I could not reach out. I could not help him. The horror was mine alone, and his was entirely his own, unfolding in that same terrifying instant. Just as my brother felt on the verge of breaking, the oppressive presence slowly began to recede. It diminished with an imperceptible withdrawal, its dark mass thinning from the corner. At that very moment, I stirred in my own sleep, jolting awake as my terrifying nightmare abruptly released me. An immediate shift in the room's atmosphere registered with me. The shadow was gone, replaced now by a suffocating silence. The air felt thick with a residue of fear. I knew with certainty that something truly disturbing had just transpired within our room. The first gray light of dawn pushed back the darkness. My brother and I lay there, both shaken and bewildered by the night. Our eyes met across the space between our beds. We exchanged a silent, knowing look. The terror of the night was etched onto our faces. The memory of the shadow, the terrifying paralysis, and the vivid nightmares coalesced into a single, unexplainable trauma that now bound us. There were no answers for what had happened. Only a persistent unease remained, and a chilling question lingered. What entity, if any, had visited our room? Our sense of safety in the world was forever altered. I was alone in the accounting office late at night, the only person left after everyone else had gone home. The building's ventilation system pushed air through the ducts, creating a consistent background movement. I focused on the glowing spreadsheet on my monitor, my eyes tired from hours of reviewing financial data. The late shift was always the same, a predictable sequence of numbers and calculations extending into the quiet hours. My fingers typed out the final figures for the day, preparing to save the work and finally leave. A single indicator light on the distant laser printer always remained dark in the corner, a black box. Then, without warning or command, the printer activated. Its internal mechanisms ground to life, emitting a series of whirs and clicks that echoed through the empty space. The machine's motor engaged, cycling paper without a document, and the paper feed mechanism began its frantic operation, a startling intrusion on the steady quiet. I walked toward the machine, noting the bright display now lit. The first sheet slid into the output tray, crisp and white. Then another followed immediately, and another. Each page bore the same stark, capitalized message: "Stop staying late." The printer continued its relentless work, feeding paper through its rollers with mechanical precision. I pulled the first stack of papers from the tray, feeling the cold smoothness of the printed sheets in my hand. But the machine did not stop its operation. The message continued to appear on every sheet, an endless stream of identical warnings. I returned to my desk, clicking the printer icon on my monitor, expecting to find an error or a large print queue. The screen showed no active print jobs, no pending documents waiting for execution. I tried to cancel any potential hidden jobs, refreshing the printer settings multiple times, but the display remained stubbornly empty. The printer kept ejecting sheet after sheet, each bearing the identical command, the sound of its continuous operation filling the otherwise quiet office. This was not an error code or a system malfunction. It was a clear instruction directed at me, repeating endlessly without source or reason, building a cold dread within me. The printer did not pause its work, continuing to feed sheets into the tray, each one bearing the relentless warning. My heart beat faster in my chest. Then, The rhythmic whirring faltered for a moment, a brief mechanical gasp before a new sheet emerged from the slot. The message had changed. 2 words appeared on the page, printed clearly, "Turn around." A cold certainty washed over me, deeper than simple fear. I found my eyes drifting towards the shiny black screen of the printer itself, its smooth surface catching the faint office lights and reflecting the room behind me. My own reflection appeared there, a pale face framed by the dark office beyond. For an instant, just behind my shoulder in the reflection, something else was present. A tall, slender shadow stood directly behind me, its outline indistinct but undeniably human-shaped. It possessed no features, only an absolute absence of light. My breath hitched in my throat. I did not move my head immediately, my gaze fixed on the impossible image in the printer's screen. My muscles tightened, demanding confirmation. Slowly, deliberately, I began to rotate my body. My chair groaned softly as I swiveled. The office behind me was empty. The rows of desks stretched into the distance. Monitors glowed faintly, but no one was present. Nothing stood there. I looked back at the printer's reflection again. The shadow was still there. It stood precisely where it had been, directly behind my physical self, a silent, watchful presence within the printer's dark screen. My own reflection now showed my back to the apparition, but the shadow remained, an unwavering dark figure that defied all logic, existing only within the reflective surface of the printer. Terror seized me, a suffocating grip. Terror seized me, a suffocating grip. I sprinted from the office, my legs burning. I rushed down the empty stairwell, fumbling for my phone to dial Mr. Henderson, the building manager. He arrived within minutes, his expression questioning. I stammered out my need to confirm the office security. He led us back to the main entrance, pulling up digital access logs on his tablet. The screen confirmed what I knew with chilling clarity. My access card was the only one used to enter the floor since 11 that night. No other employee, no cleaning staff, no security guard registered movement in or out of accounting. The building was locked down, impenetrable. His words removed any last shred of a logical explanation. The knowledge settled deep inside me, cold, a terrifying certainty defying every sensible thing I had ever known. I immediately quit working any late shifts after that night, ensuring I never again entered the accounting office after everyone else had left. The image of the shadow in the reflection did not leave my mind, a chilling presence that remained. Now, sometimes when I am completely alone at home, a soft, distant mechanical beep breaks the stillness. It is the undeniable sound of a printer powering on, always seeming to come from another room or just beyond the wall. The sound fades away as quickly as it appears, but it always returns. It is a persistent, unsettling reminder that the impossibility was real, and it continues to exist somewhere. The house contained every aspect of my father's existence, each item placed without reason or order. Piles of things covered every surface. Dusty stacks of newspapers formed precarious towers in the hallway, and the floorboards groaned under the weight of accumulated boxes. Our small rooms felt perpetually full, leaving little space for free movement. My father moved through this maze with a careful tread. He spoke few words, his presence a constant watchful weight, and his eyes never met mine for long periods. We rarely ate meals together at the chipped kitchen table. A heavy padlock secured the refrigerator door, a shiny brass statement of scarcity. I learned early not to approach the fridge without specific permission, and permission came only for the smallest portions of food, given with a silent gesture. Another absolute rule dictated no unexpected visitors ever crossed our threshold. The sound of someone knocking on the front door instantly brought a hushed panic, a desperate scramble to pretend we did not exist inside. We would hold our breath until the footsteps faded away. Most significant were the black garbage bags. They stood in corners of every room, leaning against walls, filling vacant spaces under windows and beside door frames. Some bags were small, barely containing anything. Others bulged with unseen contents tied with coarse string. My father never allowed me to touch them. He never spoke about what they contained, and I never asked. My imagination filled the dark plastic with unimaginable things, broken bones, moldy food, perhaps even parts of people. Everything inside them terrified me. Touching them was absolutely forbidden. I accepted their presence as an immutable aspect of our house, a fundamental truth that required no explanation. I simply obeyed. The call came in the night. My father died. I returned to the house, an older version of myself, but the house remained unchanged. Its silent rooms held the same accumulated clutter, the same looming stacks, the same dull light filtering through grime-coated windows. The air itself seemed heavy with the years, a weight of continued stasis. No one watched me now. The padlock still secured the refrigerator, its brass cold under my touch, but no one forbade me to open it. I did not, the habit too deeply ingrained. My eyes found the black bags first. They stood where they always had, silent and still in their familiar places. A tremor went through me. An old echo of dread, but it quickly faded. This was my house now. There was no one to stop me. I walked to the largest bag leaning in the hallway, its plastic surface dull and dusty. My fingers, surprisingly steady, untied the coarse string at its neck. I pulled open the top. Inside lay crumpled newspapers, empty tin cans, and broken plastic containers. No horror, no secrets, only the ordinary refuse of daily life, long abandoned. I moved from bag to bag, a methodical pilgrimage through the house. Each one yielded a similar collection: yellowed magazines, tattered clothes, empty food wrappers, discarded packaging materials. One bag held only old, broken toys I vaguely remembered from my early childhood. Another contained a collection of dead batteries and tangled electrical wires. The mystery that had fueled years of fearful speculation dissolved with each open bag. There was no dark secret hidden within the plastic. The bags contained only rubbish, accumulated waste without malice or deeper meaning. The true enigma was not what lay inside them, but the rules themselves, the unspoken fear they instilled, and why my father had kept everything. The small brass lock on my kitchen cabinet was barely visible. I kept it shut most days, a small brass disc securing a space I rarely used. One evening, a friend visited my apartment. She looked at the cabinet. "Why the lock?" she asked, her voice simply curious. I turned towards the cabinet, really seeing the small padlock for the first time in many years. Its brass surface caught the kitchen light. It mirrored the exact padlock that had secured my father's refrigerator. I had bought this lock years ago without thinking, affixing it to this particular cabinet. I had not consciously registered its presence since then. A sudden heat rose into my cheeks. I walked to the cabinet. My hands moved to the small key. I inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The mechanism clicked open with a soft sound. I unfastened the lock and pulled the cabinet door wide. Inside lay a collection of old receipts, a few dried-up pens, and some loose buttons. There was nothing valuable within. No important items were kept there. Only ordinary objects, accumulated without particular reason, stored behind a silent barrier. I pulled every item out of the cabinet and dropped it into the kitchen trash. The cabinet was now completely empty, a clean, open space. I stood there for a long moment, the small brass lock still in my palm. It was a tangible object from my past, a silent witness to ingrained rules. I did not discard it. I walked to my desk and placed the lock into a small drawer. Its solid weight felt real against my fingers. I understood that fully breaking free from old habits required time. The fear of scarcity, the constant need for rigid control, the unspoken rules that had governed my childhood home, they did not vanish quickly. They slowly receded, but they left indelible marks behind. I had opened the black bags. I had emptied the cabinet. The lock remained, a quiet reminder. The van smelled of stale beer and cheap cologne, a new kind of freedom I was trying to wear. Tim, my boyfriend, yelled something over the blast of his band's demo, his hand finding my leg. I squeezed his knee and smiled, a practiced movement I hoped looked natural. This was the new me, the one who didn't flinch at the chaos, the one who belonged in this rolling metal box speeding toward a remote field and a concert under the stars. Cans clinked and bottles rattled. Brian, behind the wheel, took another pull from a brown bottle, his eyes fixed on the darkening two-lane road ahead. His head bobbed with the bass line, a loose rhythmic motion that felt just a little too disconnected from the actual steering. A cloud of sweet, pungent smoke filled the space from the back seats where Maya and Jake passed a joint. Their laughter was loud and easy, mingling with the distorted guitar riffs. Everyone moved to the music, a collective pulse of young energy. They were all so completely in it, lost to the moment, vibrating with a desperate kind of joy that I watched with a quiet part of myself. Brian let out a whoop when the van hit a bump, sending a spray of cheap beer across the dashboard. He laughed, a raw, joyous sound, and gave the wheel a playful twitch. The van swayed, recovering its line a moment later, and no one else seemed to notice. My stomach tightened. I glanced at Brian's profile, his jaw set, his gaze still on the disappearing road, but his grip on the wheel seemed too relaxed. The speedometer needle hovered above 90. The light from the setting sun slanted through the grimy windows, painting streaks of orange across the dust-streaked interior. Every mile deepened the sense of leaving everything else behind, pushing further into this wild, unrestrained night. I leaned my head against the vibrating glass, feeling the engine's power beneath me, a relentless force carrying us all forward. The road curved and Brian's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The van picked up speed, the tires whined against the asphalt. He sang along, off-key, oblivious to the increasing sway, a single hand now steering, the other waving rhythmically. He gripped the bottle again, tipping it back, then slammed it down onto the console. The van swerved slightly, a subtle shift that sent a cold prickle up my spine. The others cheered louder, mistaking the carelessness for excitement, fully immersed in their own defiant roar. I watched the roadside trees blur, a dark, unbroken wall rushing past. The trees became a blur as the world pitched sideways with a violent lurch. Brian yelled a curse. The van peeled from the asphalt, its tires screaming their protest as we left the road. It tilted, then tumbled down the steep embankment. Metal shrieked. Glass exploded. My body slammed against the seatbelt, then against hard surfaces, a series of relentless impacts. Air filled with the acrid smell of burning rubber and gasoline. I heard a choked gasp, a sickening crunch, then Tim's guttural cry. The van spun, then rolled, a deafening crash as it came to rest. A sharp pain pulsed through my head. The roar of impact stopped. The absence of sound was absolute. A dull ache was the only feeling. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine. I blinked, trying to clear the haze from my vision. The world came into focus. I was upside down, trapped by the seatbelt, my head throbbing. I pushed against the crushed roof, feeling a sharp pain in my ribs. Blood trickled down my temple. The van lay a mangled wreck, metal twisted and glass shattered everywhere. Tim was slumped forward in his seat, his head at an unnatural angle. His chest was still. Maya was twisted between the front seats, her eyes open, staring at nothing. Jake lay half out of the back door, a heavy silence around him. A groan broke the awful quiet. Brian. He was stirring, struggling to push himself up from the driver's side. His face was streaked with dirt and blood. His eyes met mine, wide and panicked. "Help me," I croaked, my voice raw. He scrambled over the wreckage, his movements stiff. He unbuckled his own seatbelt and pulled himself free. He reached for me, his hand grasping my shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough. He fumbled with my seatbelt buckle. It clicked open. I fell onto the floor, a fresh wave of pain washing over me. He knelt beside me, his breath ragged. He looked around the interior, his gaze lingering on the still bodies. A strange change came over his expression. His eyes hardened. He grabbed my arm, pulling me roughly toward the driver's seat. "You were driving," he stated, his voice flat. "No, I wasn't." I tried to struggle. He slammed my head against the dashboard. The world spun. He hit me again, a hard blow to my stomach. I gasped, unable to breathe. He dragged my limp body into the driver's seat, forcing my hands onto the steering wheel. He wiped blood from his own face onto my shirt. He pulled a broken bottle from the floor and placed it in my hand, then let it drop. He pushed my fingers around the wheel, leaving his own prints over mine. "This is on you," he snarled. He stood up, looking over the wrecked van one last time. He glanced at me, lying half-conscious against the steering wheel. He turned and stumbled toward the dark tree line. He disappeared into the trees without a backward glance. I watched him go, my body aching, my mind struggling to comprehend. The darkness swallowed him whole. The throbbing behind my eyes pushed at the edges of my vision. Brian's form receded into the dark wall of trees, dissolving into the night. I tried to move my fingers around the steering wheel, but they had no feeling. The metal of the wheel pressed against my numb palms. The broken bottle lay on the seat beside my thigh. He had left me here, fatally injured, framed for everything. No one would ever find me in this mangled wreck, hidden deep in the wilderness. No one would learn what Brian had done. A shallow breath caught in my throat, a fading sound. The last light in the world flickered, then went out. Only the dark remained. I woke early and went to our room. Sunlight entered through the window. My love lay still in the bed. I leaned over him and brushed my lips against his forehead. His skin felt cool. "Good morning, my dear," I whispered. He did not respond. I did not expect him to answer. This was our morning ritual. I pulled back the blankets, careful not to disturb his position, and began to clean him. He needed fresh clothes every day. I spoke to him about the weather outside and the birds singing in the garden. He always listened. I combed his dark hair and arranged it just so. His eyes remained closed. I knew he was comfortable. I placed a kiss on his cheek again before dressing him in a clean shirt. Outside, a shrill voice cut through the air. Mrs. Henderson again. "Anna, are you home?" she shouted. I ignored her. She always made such a racket. The front door rattled. She pounded on the wood. "There is a terrible smell coming from your house," she screamed. "The whole street is talking." I heard other voices joining in, low murmurs becoming louder. They spoke of strange noises late at night. I simply closed our window to block them out. My love deserved peace. He just needed to rest. Their complaints meant nothing. I picked up his hand and held it. His fingers were stiff, but I loved their feel. The world outside could wait. I had my love. The shouting outside grew into a continuous clamor. I heard them discussing the smell again, their voices filled with anger. I pulled the curtain across our window, wanting to keep their negativity from our space. A sharp rap sounded at the front door. I knew this knock was not Mrs. Henderson's frantic pounding. This knock held a different weight, a firm authority. A man's voice spoke, clear and stern, demanding I open the door. I did not move from my love's side. He needed me here. Another voice joined the first, deeper. They stated they were police officers. They said they had received multiple complaints. They spoke of a welfare check. I tightened my grip on my love's hand. His skin felt cool beneath my palm. "They are trying to disturb us, my dear," I whispered to him, my voice low. "They do not understand our peace." The knocking continued, growing more insistent, resonating through the entire house. Then the man's voice again, louder this time. He said they would be forced to enter if I did not comply. I knew what that meant. They meant to come inside. They meant to take my love from me. I leaned over him, pressing my ear against his chest, listening for the faint rise and fall I always imagined. "Please, my dear," I urged him. "You must wake up, just for a moment. Show them you are here with me." I stroked his cheek, hoping to coax him awake. His eyes remained closed, his face still. A splintering sound ripped through the quiet of our home. The front door shuddered against its frame. I heard wood crack. They were forcing their way in. I would not let them reach him. I positioned myself in front of the bed, my back to my love, ready to shield him. Another loud snap, then the sudden crash of the door as it gave way. The harsh light of the morning streamed into the hallway. Footsteps thudded on the wooden floor. I heard several men speaking as they entered my home. The men in uniforms entered our room. Their eyes immediately went to the bed, to my love. I stood firm, blocking them as best I could. The taller officer stepped forward, his face contorting. He stopped short, one hand going to his nose, his eyes wide. He looked at me, then back at my love. I saw understanding dawn in his gaze, a terrible realization. Another officer came up beside him, his expression quickly mirroring the first. They saw my love was gone. They saw what I refused to see. "Ma'am, step away from the bed," the first officer commanded, his voice strained. I did not move. He reached for my arm. I recoiled, shielding my love. "He is only sleeping," I told them, my voice firm. "You must not disturb him." The second officer pulled out a device. He spoke into it, his words clipped. "We have a deceased male. Appears to have been here for some time. Suspect is uncooperative." His eyes swept over the room, then landed on me. He took out restraints. They moved towards me with purpose. I knew they meant to take him. I knew they meant to separate us forever. My heart pounded against my ribs. "No," I cried, my voice rising. "You cannot touch him. He is mine." I turned back to my love, pressing my hands onto his chest, begging him. "My love, please, wake up for me now. Show them." I whispered words of desperate longing. Then a sound came from the bed. A low, guttural exhalation escaped his lips. The officers froze. Their eyes widened, fixed on my love. His eyelids fluttered, slow and heavy, then opened a fraction. A dull, milky glaze showed in his eyes. His head turned on the pillow, a dry rasping sound accompanying the movement. A slow, agonizing twitch went through his left arm. It lifted, stiff and unnatural, bending at the elbow with a creak. His fingers, rigid before, curled slowly, a macabre invitation. A collective gasp left the officers. They stumbled back, their faces ashen. One dropped his device. The air filled with their terror. My love's lips parted, revealing yellowed teeth, and a wet, sickening gurgle came from his throat. He pushed himself upwards, cadaverous, his movements jerky and disjointed. His vacant gaze found mine. A cold triumph filled me. He heard me. He answered me. He was here for me. My twisted desire was granted.